Hey everyone, so I'm Frisky Fox, the founder of DeFi Kingdoms. We were the first subnet on Avalanche and still the biggest one. We do like 450 million transactions on our chain plus, I think it's 467, about 1 to 2 every day. We do more transactions with gas than Ethereum, Polygon, BNB, C-Chain. So it's really just a testament to how amazing subnets are. They're just this whole like revolutionary thing. We see a lot of use cases out there for games. They're kind of the pioneers, but there's a lot of other things going on, and that's sort of what we're here to talk about with these guys. So could you each just like spend a minute and kind of introduce yourselves and sort of talk about what you're doing?
Yeah, how's it going, everybody? If you're still here and you came with your luggage on your way out of town, thank you guys for sticking around for our panel so we could talk about stuff we care about.
That's actually my luggage. Sorry.
That's your luggage. My name is John Belitsky. I'm the co-founder of Balcony. Balcony is bringing real-world real estate on-chain as NFTs. And importantly, what this means is every facet of real estate, every piece of metadata that you could ever think of that describes real estate, the size, the square footage, the easements, encumbrances, the electricity usage, the air rights, the mineral rights, every single thing that describes the capital asset on-chain. And importantly, I am a blockchain maxi. I'm not a crypto maxi, I'm a blockchain maxi. And I love crypto for how it facilitates the business that we all do here. But my objective is to get absolutely every single piece of metadata that describes real estate on-chain, immutably for perpetuity, to create, at some point in the future, liquidity. And so that's the framework that I'll be speaking from today. Everything on-chain, massive amounts of metadata for some future liquidity event that's only achievable through radical transparency.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you've been in like this industry for what, like 10 years, I think?
No, I started in real estate when I was a 16-year-old kid in the Bronx. So I've been doing this,
Dating yourself.
Yeah, we're going on 27 years at this point.
Okay, so let's do some math. No, just kidding. No, that's awesome. Over to you, Rushi.
Yeah, I'm Rushi, co-founder and CTO for Movement. We're building a Move Layer 1, leveraging Avalanche Summit technology and warp messaging to make the Move language more accessible and bring it to the mainstream. For those that don't know, Move is a language designed by Facebook back in the DM days. Due to regulation issues, they had to split up into 2 teams, Aptos and Sui. Aptos launched a few months ago, Sui launched 2 days ago. But the narrative we're trying to push is Move is the future of smart contract language. It's the most secure language in that it protects against re-uncertainty attacks, security vulnerabilities. It was designed to be for retail and Web 2 markets in that any builder can build on top of it and not have to worry about their protocol getting hacked for millions and millions of dollars. Additionally, it brings payload processing to the table. I know TPS is a number that we float around a lot, but payload processing allows for the actual streamlining of transactions for DeFi and particularly gaming purposes, so we can address those bottlenecks that we're seeing in the status quo for gaming. We personally believe the narrative that subnets are the future in terms of Move language because of native access to liquidity. A huge struggle with building new layer 1s or new Move language or frameworks is how you're getting liquidity. Everyone's stuck in the EVM phase, so people tried to bring liquidity to non-EVM ecosystems, and it hasn't really worked. Aptos is like 50 million TVL, Sui just launched, and we're yet to see what happens. What if we bring this new cutting-edge technologies to the forefront of EVM? And it's pretty much only accomplishable in Avalanche, so with warp messaging. What if we launched a layer 1 with this new modular framework that could tap into Benki's liquidity, that could tap into GMX's liquidity, that could tap into these large liquidity pools that exist on EVM, but see the benefit of Move transaction speed and security. And that's why we're here today.
Awesome. So I'm hearing security and speed and all these things. You started on Aptos, right? And then you moved to Avalanche?
Yeah, I was an engineer within Aptos. My co-founder was also building Aptos protocol. We were building yield aggregator, and there was no yield to aggregate in Aptos because it was a new chain. If you build that same yield aggregator on Movement, now you get access to Avalanche liquidity and actually see adoption for the Move language.
Awesome. Sweet. Over to you, Mike.
Cool. So I'm Michael Weinrub. I'm the co-founder of Sparq Labs, Inc., behind Sparknet. We're all about speed, so we right now have an application chain custom VM that can be deployed as a subnet on Avalanche, capable of 400,000 transactions per second, sub-second finality, and we're also able to process smart contracts on the execution side in 1 microsecond. which is about 100 times quicker than EVM. We're also building a cross-chain solution to stitch together our subnets and custom VMs, basically allowing interoperability with external protocols, other subnets, app chains, other ecosystems, so we can basically communicate with each other, send assets across different chains, and basically put everything on chain, which is the major use case for what we're building.
Wow, that's awesome. That's impressive numbers over there you guys have. Our project has frequently broken chains. Like, we started on Harmony and we broke them a lot. We went to Subnet to address that in part, and we've really pushed the envelope. We've had multiple updates that have been done with Avalanche Labs to kind of like address some of those scaling concerns, and we still work very closely with them. But speed is important for a lot of use cases, but I'm just curious, what use cases out there are like 400,000 transactions per second, and how do you guys see that? I guess we'll just kind of start here and go down, but what are the use cases out there for that kind of technology?
Yeah, so our major partners right now are mostly in GameFi, so we're able to basically bake our blockchain right into the game clients. So, I mean, if everyone knows how a game is built, most games are built in C++ or C# right now. And so being able to develop your smart contract in C++ and be able to mirror what is happening in your game client and then verify it in real time is a huge solution for security, especially in play-to-earn and multiplayer services. So that's one of our major verticals that's being leveraged for our custom VMs, and then also porting over legacy systems, especially from the financial sector.
Yeah, we're kind of similar playbook with GameFi, pushing the TPS boundaries. The huge value add we're doing is making sure the end user doesn't even know using Move. The ability for us to go to Move plugin for many gaming partners and essentially have it as a backend for the existing EVM ecosystems, so the end user can see these high throughput numbers, not limited to bottlenecks, and really see their solution scales. What we're doing with a lot of gaming partners is blockchain as a service. So for these gaming partners, they need their own environments with their own validator sets. It's really hard for them, probably DeFi kingdoms, to build on existing primary chains and existing independent environments. So we need to launch their own independent chain where they can thrive with their own execution environment. We're modular in the sense that you can choose your tech stack. So we're partnering with EigenLayer, having EigenDA as an option, swapping out settlement layers, swapping out execution layers with your Aptos VM, Sui VM, working on some ZK stuff in the back. So very customizable is what we're trying to thrive, bringing it to DeFi, bringing it to gaming, allowing these apps to really scale. Furthermore, Move is particularly bullish on DNFTs. So currently, let's take Gunzilla, for example. When you have to attach a new piece to your gun, that's a whole new NFT you have to mint. Think about how many transactions Gunzilla and these first-person shooters are doing. If they hit their mark, they should be hitting millions and millions, if not billions of transactions a day, and you can't be minting new NFTs each time a player upgrades their loot, right? So with Sui DNFTs, the benefit is the contracts themselves are built to swap up pieces. It's dynamic NFTs. Let's say, for example, you're a first-person shooter and you level up in a given game. Instead of minting a whole new NFT for your gun, you can swap out the caliber, you can swap out the mag within the smart contract itself, so it limits the bottlenecks that probably DeFi kingdoms and other first-person shooters and other games see, because it's within the smart contract to not have to remint a new transaction and remint a new NFT, and instead it's within the actual NFT encoded, and address a lot of the bottlenecks we can see. So you don't even need high TPS solutions if you can modify the NFT itself.
Yeah, I'm like the freak on this panel. I'm the exact opposite worldview from all of this. So we use dynamic NFTs as well to update the metadata on real estate. But has anybody here ever purchased real estate? Like, just raise your hand if you've purchased real estate. Okay. Do you recall what your settlement time was when you bought your property? Like, we didn't measure it in seconds, we measure it in months, okay? So it's like, if you can settle a real estate transaction in 90 days, you're awesome. Like, you're just killing it. You're pretty fast, right? So the idea of throughput time and TPS for us is just, like, it's laughable. So I went shopping for a chain, as many of you founders probably did, which is like, it's basically like shopping for a used car. Like, you go out looking for all these chains, and everybody's telling you, like, oh, we sell at 400,000 transactions per second. And I'm like, I'm basically like a sad suburban dad with like 8 children, and I need a minivan, and you're like, this Ferrari does 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. And I'm like, that's cool. Does Timmy fit in it? And you're like, it's really fast. And like, it has nothing to do with my life at all. Like, I just don't give a shit about how fast these transactions settle. What I need is a tractor trailer. I need a giant tractor trailer. And so we came to Subnets because we couldn't find a tractor trailer that did what we want in our business, in real estate. And that is, we want to take massive amounts of metadata and load it into our tractor trailer, put it on our chain. So we actually built 2 subnets. We built a subnet for our structured data, and we built a subnet for our unstructured data. So one subnet strictly provides us with the data that we can put into a uint256 or a string, like ordered data, right? That can return things that can be used in an API and so forth. And then the other one is for things like deeds and title that date back to like the Revolutionary War in New Jersey, like George Washington's first pied-à-terre. We need to bring his title and deed on chain. And that could take a year as far as I'm concerned. I really don't care how long it takes. And so because these solutions weren't available to us, we had to go out and build them. And the subnet for us was like the end of stupid conversations. It was like the eulogy for like dumb Web3, and it was the birth of actually functional, completely composable and customizable solutions that addresses our weird, literally caveman industry. And that's how we ended up here.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I always hear about how like Web3, is the future of the internet. You think about all the things that happen on the internet. There's everything these days. You don't even think about the internet when you're on Facebook or Twitter or when you're having a call on like WhatsApp. But there's so much happening there, and I really do think it is the future of the internet. But we're going to need a lot of transactions. But what a lot of people aren't thinking about is space, like you're saying. Like there's a lot of data. We have like IPFS and things like that. But the beauty of subnets is that you can really customize it to do whatever your use case is and have a bunch of things there. So I think we're going to see a lot of that happening where there's a lot more subnets being spun up for specific use cases. But at the same time, that's also kind of like fractionalizing a lot of the Web3 world. So let's talk about interoperability, which I think somebody was going to say, use that buzzword. But I've like heard it this whole time. But how do you solve the problem of having all these different subnets, and how do you connect them? So I guess if anyone wants to start there, we'll go on down.
Sure. So at the core of what we've built is that we wanted to have a compatibility with all the existing tools. So the Web3 libraries, MetaMask, Core, everything that everyone's using right now. And so whenever we go about building infrastructure for the masses and driving adoption, you need to make sure that it's relevant and it's familiar. And so that's what we've done with our first Orbiter SDK, which is our C++ custom VM. And so with that, we've made it possible to basically port over any of the existing assets, any of the existing EVM protocols, anything that exists today can be used within our infrastructure. And then kind of building on top of that, the communication aspects, like you have Avalanche, who has cross-chain messaging. We've built, or we are building, what we call Gateway, which is a little bit different in infrastructure in that you can deploy on top of it. You can use it to do cross-chain messaging, cross-chain transfers of assets as well, and basically connect anything that is a subnet or protocol from any of the EVM chains to basically communicate with any of the current existing protocols using a smart contract.
Awesome. Rushi, I know that you guys have been implementing AWM as a solution for that, I think. Can you sort of like elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I would argue that AWM is going to be one of the most important innovations in Avalanche history because the ability to communicate cross subnet, cross primary chain is what's going to define interoperability. You want all these different environments, whether it's cross VM, cross use case, cross ecosystem, to be able to communicate with each other. If you fragment different chains, different subnets, then you run into the same problem, monolithic, single off chains that don't really have utility. So when we see this AWM roll out, hopefully the launch of the primary chain goes pretty well. Shout out Aaron Bushwell for that. But let's try, we pride ourselves on having cross VM execution layers, having blockchains as a service for our partners. We're leveraging AWM to make sure that A, communication can happen, so it's like IBC in a sense, but also communication of assets can happen. So for example, if you have a gaming chain for specific gaming protocol, what if there's a world where that gaming chain can also communicate with a different gaming game? What if Gunzilla game and Shrapnel communicate each other and can transfer assets? So if you have a skin in Gunzilla, congratulations, now you can bring that skin to Shrapnel. That's something that the Web2 gaming world hasn't seen. If you have a skin on Call of Duty, you probably can't bridge that to like Fortnite, right? Well, what if Fortnite could talk to Call of Duty? And that's a game changer, and that's how Web3 could completely change and disrupt the gaming industry. Because now if you're a gamer and you don't even know about blockchain technology, and you put money into a specific game, that money that you put in the specific game can go across the ecosystem. And I think that's the narrative we're trying to push when we're onboarding gaming partners and DeFi partners to allow for transaction of assets, both subnet to subnet, and even with our network from Aptos VM, Sui VM, any other VMs we push out there, but also cross to the primary chain where all our partners are trying to make it happen.
Awesome. John, you have 2 subnets. How do you make them work together?
Yeah, so we solve a lot of this through our data architecture, or sorry, digital architecture, right? Our digital architecture has these nested dynamic NFTs that we kind of put metadata inside and organize it in the same way you might organize like a folder on your desktop and kind of like step into folders, right? So on some level, if we get to something that exists on some other chain, we could just hash it inside of one of these folders, right? And so we have at least a reference for it. We have a record for it in this singular place that people can go to and trust. And so that's the first way that we deal with this. The second way is much more simple, which it's not spoken about, I think, enough in our industry, which is the schema, right? Like you have to standardize how these things work. You can't go between these games unless you have a standardized schema and you could allow for data to move. And in my industry, I think in most industries, people just want to do their own thing, right? And everybody wants to become like the grand architect of this new way of doing everything, and everybody has a better way to do it. And what I'm trying to urge people to do is agree on one kind of crappy way to do things, but that we could all agree on. You know, like take something that allows us to standardize the least standardized industry on the planet, also a $326 trillion total addressable market, largest asset class, the literal earth, right? And just standardize a single way to do this so that somebody in Bangladesh can do a deal in Brooklyn with eyes closed confidence with the exact same protocols and doesn't have to do, you know, any sort of like gymnastics to get there.
A quick question for you, actually. How does KYC work for that? Because if you are creating a standard for cross-country, cross-residential communities, how does like KYC, U.S. legislation, like how are you? Is it evergreen subnet, stuff like that?
Yeah. So this is like a critical component of why we had to build a subnet, right? So real estate is completely centralized. It's in one place. It has a literal address. Like you just go to it. It is 100% subject to censure. Putin can bomb it. I mean, it exists. There's nobody who owns it anonymously, right? And so part of what I need is a chain where I know every single person on my chain. So back when I was shopping for a chain and I was going to these used car salesmen, they're like, oh, it's completely public and permissionless. I'm like, so now you want me to turn the Ferrari that you're selling me into an Uber, but wait, it gets better. I don't get to know who's riding in the Uber with me. Just anybody can just jump in and drive around in my Ferrari. It just made no sense. So we have a chain where every single person is KYC'd, every single person is AML'd. We know every single person who gets into our tractor trailer. We know where they're going, where they came from. And frankly, it's no different than how they're transacting real estate now, because real estate as an asset class is not just an asset, it's also a liability. You have to pay the tax man, and the tax man wants to know who you are. So we need that information up front, and now we have a much more secure chain where everybody transacting has been, you know, approved to do so.
Yeah, that's awesome. I still remember back when I first heard about NFTs, and I was just kind of like, so what? But then I thought about it, I'm like, what is this useful for? I didn't think art. Everyone thinks art now. But I thought of real estate first. I was like, that, you know, like all kinds of deeds and titles. What other things do you think are useful to put on a blockchain in like real world assets?
So first of all, I am an absolute blockchain maxi. I believe that everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized. I adore NFTs. You know, Satoshi gave us a trust machine, NFTs gave us a provenance machine. I intend to exploit both of them to the fullest extent possible, right? So I believe everything. I'm working with companies that want to bring media on-chain, right? So obviously royalties and so forth, but also provable views, right? Because fluffing views and metrics and cost per thousand, which is the typical metric used to price views in media, is a huge problem, right? It's fraud, frankly, and our industry kills fraud when it's done correctly. When we don't give the keys to, you know, SBF, our industry kills fraud, right? And so that's one place that I'm very interested in. You know, deed and title to cars, obviously, identity, obviously. I mean, really everything. And then even inside of cities, anybody here from New York City? So when you go down the steps on the subway, you ever notice that every single step has a serial number? Every step of every platform in the city of New York is serialized. It's an NFT. It's an NFT. I want every one of those steps to be an NFT. And I want it on my chain. And I want every piece of metadata. I want to know when the union guy went over and he said, oh, I fixed this step, and it took me 6.5 hours at $8,000 a minute, which is what the union charges for this work, for the MTA. I want to see how much time he spent on step number 8457693 at 14th Street, right? So literally everything will be tokenized, in my view.
Oh, that's awesome. How do we get to the point where everything is on the chain? Like, what kind of pain points have you guys seen and that you're trying to solve with trying to bring other people to create their own subnets? I guess I'll ask this probably from Mike first, instead of what you guys are doing. But what are you trying to solve for these people, and why should they come to you?
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the major things, especially in GameFi, is that if you were to put everything on chain, it gets too expensive in smart contracts. So that's one of the major things that we've solved. I mean, that's a solution for subnets overall, is that you can basically customize them however you need it. So, I mean, with our solution, you have a lot more flexibility to do many more things because you do have C++ as your tool. And so kind of comparing that to what our existing solutions, kind of going into what you were mentioning earlier on NFTs, especially within games, one thing that we're working on with a few of our partners is the ability to have open transactions. And so if you were to go into a multiplayer game or a first-person shooter, typically on those games, especially the centralized ones, you want to be tracking all of the information within your game session. And so if you were to go into a multiplayer game, you would open up a transaction, you get put into a server, maybe a server gets spooled up and you're paying for that in real time, and your transaction is basically tracking every single thing you're doing in that game. How many times you've shot, how many footsteps you've made, how many times you missed, your accuracy, all of these different things that are being basically sent to the mempool of your application chain or blockchain. And at the end of the session, when someone wins, or if it was a 5v5 match, your team won or lost, all of your information, all of the metrics from that game session would be pushed to the blockchain. And at the end of that transaction, maybe you earned something. Maybe it's an NFT, things like that. So, one thing, in addition to that, we actually have a randomization engine built into the transactions themselves, which is super crucial for NFT creation. So if you're, winning something at the end of a match, or maybe it's just random where you get something or not, we can basically handle that for all of our game partners, which is something where you had to go to external parties or just some of these things that were just not possible without this infrastructure.
How about you, Rushi? Like, what kind of pain points could Move fix for people?
People are stubborn. You see all the discourse on Twitter with the ETH maxis, the EVM maxis. Solana took years to even see adoption at limited capacity. I think you're going to face the same stubbornness with the real-world assets. Real estate especially is very stubborn. But convincing people that there's a world outside of EVM is probably our hardest challenge. Aptos and Suite definitely made it easier with their large raises and the support they're being garnering in Southeast Asia. But convincing people that, hey, your assets can be stored outside of EVM, stored outside of specific use cases. Not everyone needs to use EVM. There's certain use cases like gaming that need personalized VMs for specific use cases, because we can't ever see the real world adoption for hitting the millions and million users that Call of Duty is going to have with EVM. It's just a flat out fact, unless Monad comes out with some cool parallelization with EVM, which I'm looking forward to. But convincing people that modularity and customization is okay, that you don't need to just build on an L2 OP stack rollup that's 5 TPS. You can actually see a world outside that with high performance, customization. And we've seen a lot of great breakthroughs recently with the whole modular stack. So looking forward to the future, but I think definitely stubbornness is something that we're working on, and that's going to be a part of our marketing play.
Stubbornness just as it relates to using a different language to code, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Move was very, very new. Like the 2 biggest blockchains launched within 6 months. So obviously it takes time to see adoption, to actually see people using it. That's why we're bringing it to Avalanche, where they can natively tap into ecosystem that already has years of usage, years of community, instead of forcing them to go elsewhere. We're bringing a new language to the front door of existing ecosystems instead of forcing people to use a new wallet, use a new technology, completely change their way of life. By bringing it to the front door, like my co-founder says, being the Amazon of Move, that's what we're doing here at Movement Labs.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I remember about 2 or 3 months ago, had a meeting with you guys, and you're kind of asking about like, what's up with subnets, and like, we'd like to get in on this, and having some kind of intel stuff going on. But I was just wondering, like, why Avalanche as opposed to some of the other, I guess there aren't any real good solutions out there, but you know, there's like other ones that have been announced from other places as well. Why Avalanche for you guys for subnets? And I guess starting with you.
Thank you. We spoke to like pretty much every major lead in every ecosystem. Most of the big EVM ecosystems like Binance, Polygon are very, very EVM centric. They don't have a technical cross-chain, not something in the playbook. We also looked at Cosmos, but the huge struggle is, okay, we launched a new Cosmos zone, then what? How do we get liquidity from Osmosis? How do we get liquidity in Juno? How do we get liquidity from these major Cosmos players? It's going to be the same struggle as Aptos' suite. We're just on an L1. Cool, you have IBC that communicates. Then what? Like, how do you transport liquidity? How do you see adoption? How do you kickstart Move? We see Avalanche as the first place to kickstart innovation because you can really jumpstart liquidity and jumpstart user bases. It doesn't matter how much funds you raise. Aptos raised, what, $300 million? How much TVL is on it? Nothing. You need to wait, and you need to jumpstart liquidity, and that's where we see Avalanche warm messaging. We're particularly very bullish on it, and we believe by having partners that already have liquidity, already have tractions, already have users in the space, and then bring innovation and be like, hey, for basically no code, you can get benefits of Move, both on the Aptos side, we're having a module for Aptos and Speed Builders, we can natively tap into Movement, and on the EVM side, on the Avalanche side, you have warm messaging, which handles out-of-the-box communication. So for both protocols levels, both on the Move side and the EVM side, there's pretty much no friction, and that's why we believe in Avalanche, and Avalanche is the future.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk future, like 3 to 5 years from now. What do you guys think it's going to look like? I mean, 3 to 5 years ago, there was Ethereum and basically nothing else. And now we see all these other L1s, and we're in this stage now where we've got subnets. I remember when I first heard about subnets when Avalanche Labs was kind of talking with us about it to try and be the first actual implementation of this, and it just blew my mind. It was like, this is the future for a lot of these app chain type things that are specific, just like you're saying, something you can really just make it be tailor-made for your project. What does it look like 3 to 5 years from now, in your opinion? Starting with you, John.
Hundreds of thousands of subnets, conservatively.
Wow.
I'm serious. I'm dead serious.
Agreed.
I'll give you an example. So I met with an entertainer in LA recently, and he told me like the tried old story. He had this accountant, and he trusted him. Trust. I love trust. And the guys, he ripped them off, right? Obviously, that's how this works. You trust people, and they rip you off. And it occurred to me, I was like, you should just have your own subnet, which is a giant pain in the ass if you're just some entertainer who is not really technically capable, and you don't code or anything. But now, as of I think 2 days ago, there's like one button deployment for effectively these out-of-the-box subnets. So why wouldn't every family office to start use that? Right? You've got 80 different descendants that are all living off of great grandpa DuPont's money, and somebody's like managing it, and they all have questions. That should be on chain, right? So we'll start there. So every single family office to start, right? Eventually, you get down to the point where your family's groceries are going to be on chain. Like, why the hell not? Why not have a tool that allows this thing to be immutable, that allows you to query it with whatever logic you want? Why wouldn't you do that? Why doesn't this replace effectively every Google sheet that you have at some point? So eventually, orders of many, many, many millions of subnets, but certainly in the next 3 to 5 years, I would be shocked if it's not hundreds of thousands.
Well, that's awesome. How about from you, Mike, and then Rushi?
Sure. Yeah, so I don't know how many people are familiar with like the early days of Bitcoin, but when it first came out, everyone was saying Amazon, Starbucks, Walmart, all these companies are going to have their own blockchains. And then Ethereum came out. Then everyone was making smart contracts. Then we started hitting the limitations, and the gas costs were spiraling, and all of these things. And then we needed layer 2s. Now we need zero knowledge proofs and rollups. But I think we're kind of going back to this original thesis where everyone's getting their own subnet. And like you said, there's going to be hundreds, maybe even millions subnets or application chains, even maybe not on Avalanche, but hopefully on Avalanche as a subnet. And so with that, we're kind of going back into creating your own bespoke custom solutions for your company. But at the core of it, you still need to make it as easy as possible to build these blockchains. So one of the focuses at Sparknet is that we want to make it as close as possible to building as like a smart contract with Solidity on top of what you would deploy as a subnet. And so if you were to go and deploy something, like you put up your application chain or your custom VM, and you have to host it with your own validators, which is already a barrier to entry there. But once you do that, you could basically build out a network that is acting as a smart contract and solving the problems for what it is that you're building. And that's basically what we have built as infrastructure. Is we've kind of separated the layer of a shared VM into separate blockchains that are all communicating with each other as smart contracts, just that their own blockchains themselves.
Awesome. Over to you, Rushi.
I think for us, it's like the vision is customizations and modularity. Like each enterprise, each dApp, each DeFi, gaming use case, real use case needs its own solution, whether it's consensus mechanisms, whether it's execution mechanisms. Some people, like these guys, don't need 200,000 TPS. They'll be lucky to get 0.0001 and they're fine. They'll make $1 million first year, right? So we can't have this layer 3, layer 4 solutions that constantly keep on bridging on top of it to be a VC scheme. It needs to be customizations personalized for each use case. And I think in the next 5 years, when we're seeing a lot of these adoptions, you're going to be able to press one button, and not only press one button, choose what layers you're building on, specify exactly how much TPS you want, because maybe you don't need to pay money for 200,000 TPS. Maybe you only need 5 TPS. You don't want to spend 100K a month for that cost, right? On the data side, like maybe you don't want your data to be stored in AWS. Maybe you want a decentralized database, right? So the concept of modularity is what we really thrive ourselves on. In the next 5 years, when we actually see a lot of adoption happening, everyone's going to want their own version. And instead of creating these own one-off layer 3, layer 4 solutions, why don't we create custom subnets with custom execution environments where they can just be just for them? It doesn't need to be this whole new blockchain. It just be, I need this blockchain, I'm going to build it for what I want, and maybe make my money.
Amen. That's exactly right. Both of you guys, I'm 100% on the same page.
Yeah, it's sounding to me kind of like AWS or something, but for blockchains. Choose your size of your instance and spin it up and create what you need. I think that's awesome. Over here at DeFi Kingdoms, we are excited about cross-chain stuff and having sort of like a realm on all of the big chains out there, but also having our own subnet as sort of the backbone for it all to kind of tie together, and that's what we're all about right now.
Can I ask you a question, actually,
yeah,
about
go for it.
DeFi Kingdoms?
Sure.
Because I followed closely to your movement off of Harmony, which I frankly think was a very disappointing chain. And obviously you guys thought so as well. Their RPCs were not so great.
We kind of broke them a lot.
You broke them quite a bit. And I spoke to them about this, actually. I spoke to them about you guys. But did you see the subnet the way I see the subnet, which was de-risking of the platform risk vector for the blockchain?
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. We sort of had to step back and looked at it, and we're like, look, we've got all our eggs in one basket here. Part of the reason that we want to go cross-chain is not just to have access to a lot more players and a lot more assets and liquidity and stuff like that, but it's also to make sure we don't have all our eggs in one basket and sort of have other places our players can go if one of them goes offline, which actually happened a fair amount. We'd say, okay, this realm is down, but guess what? You can still play our game on this other chain that we haven't yet broken or something. But that was really a huge part of it, was just making sure we were spreading out the risk. So yeah, that's an excellent question. We're almost out of time, but I did want to ask one more question. If you can choose one thing that you guys are working on right now that you're the most excited about, what is that and why?
Mine's fast and easy. We are bringing municipalities in the state of New Jersey on-chain now. We went to DC last week, met with some senators, so we're looking at a national rollout, bringing actual governments on-chain, which means that eventually we are going to turn title into bytecode. So it won't be the image of George Washington's deed from 1772 with Martha on it. it's going to be actual bytecode. Once you turn these instruments into bytecode, then they're automated, then they're actually transactable, then we could actually get liquidity. And so I believe that we at Balcony are going to very soon be able to create liquidity in a completely illiquid asset class, and that really excites me.
Well, that's exciting. Thank you. Rushi.
For us, it's parallel processing. Currently, Aptos, even though they raised so much money and they launched 7 months, is not even parallelized, even though they market it as a parallel chain. We're going to be the first parallel VM in the EVM community, which is pretty exciting.
Wow, that's amazing. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, I would say it's mostly in the GameFi side. So being able to verify actions inside the games in real time really solves a lot of problems and makes it so we can have real games on chain and not have to offload everything to centralized servers and things like that. So putting everything on chain is what mostly excites me about like building subnets and our infrastructure overall.
Awesome. Yeah, all the things. Great. Well, we're out of time, but I just want to say thank you to all these panelists. You guys have been great. Everyone out here, make sure to follow them on all their socials. I think you can find them on the app. And yeah, just thanks for your time, and let's go Subnets.